Hello and welcome to day 21 of the summer 2025 database-driven web development course. For today's video, what I'm gonna really want to do is kind of talk about a couple new things, a few new things, but I really want to go over, pretty much review what I did yesterday in the going over to lab 0301 lab on day 20, which is on Monday. So just kind of want to go over a lot of just the concepts, just to make sure you know what you need to do, and go from there. First, I want to kind of bring up the GitHub Student Developer Pack. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. So as a student within GitHub, and I don't know if some students have already done this maybe, but since you're a student, you can install the GitHub developer pack, sign up for it. And as part of that developer pack is also the Git Copilot. So you can go ahead and use GitHub Copilot for free within Visual Studio Code. So I highly suggest you go ahead and do that. Now, in the first year courses, I really didn't push that much. And actually, when I was in my when I was in Visual Studio writing code, I had that kind of disabled, because if you don't, it's going to pop up suggestions all the time. So a lot of times I had that disabled, just for the fact that the first year kind of best to really learn those concepts. But in the second year courses, obviously it's much more beneficial to be using the GitHub Copilot, and hopefully you've got at least most of the concepts and the fundamentals already down and understand what you need in that area. So I suggest go ahead and sign up for this student developer pack. You're gonna have to use your student email, I believe, on that. Obviously, I haven't done this because I can't. As a teacher, mine's kind of limited, but I suggest you go ahead and do this, and so that you can get GitHub Copilot for use in like Visual Studio Code. And since we're talking about that, so in here also you've got an extensions, and you can go ahead and install the GitHub Copilot one. It's right here. Okay. And it's your pair programmer. So this is part of that. Let me know if you have any questions about that, but basically you're going to go ahead and install the Copilot, and you'll be signing in. Also, you'll have to sign in to GitHub. So here I'm signed in, so I'm using Copilot as my pair programmer here. So you'll have to install that GitHub Copilot extension as well. All right. Next, I want to go ahead and review the configuration and using the debug statements. I know in previous assignments, some of the students didn't have that configured correctly, so I'm going to kind of review that. So in here, let's see here. Let's close this out. So in your env file, you need to have this debug. Now you can call this whatever you want. You can call this, anything you choose to call this. This is what I'm using, calling it app. If you don't have any other ideas, just I would use app here. And then so when you have this in here, you need to have this in your .env file. And then let's look at like the user.js file. And then in here, how you're going to configure this is obviously you need to import debug, which you have to also, for anything you're importing that's not local, you can import things that are local, like local JavaScript modules and that, but anything external, any of those third-party things, which we use plenty of those, any of these imports, you'll have to make sure you do the npm install. So you've got the debug one. And then in here, as you can see, we've got the debug for this. We created a constant called debug user. So I suggest, just so that you've got different statements that are showing in your console, For like the user one, the way, to classify them together, you could use like debug user. For the bug one, you could do debug bug, etc. The important thing here is to make sure that you have this prefixed. What you have here has to be the same as what you have here, okay, for it to work. So keep that in mind. Here really doesn't matter. This is just a label, whatever you want to call this, and just in this case calling it user, okay? But this is very important. Okay, so that is what you need for configuring those debug statements. And okay, so let's review. Now let's review what kind of what we talked about yesterday, what we did to get MongoDB configured. So first, you go ahead and grab the code from the lab. At the beginning of the lab, it has your database.js code. So go ahead and grab that and paste that inside it. Create a database.js file and paste that, save that. And then you want to make sure that you do the npm install of MongoDB. Okay. And here I'm doing for my debug statements, I'm just using database. Okay. So once you have this in here, what you'll need to make sure you do is in your env file for the database. Here's got a database URL. Actually, I would really call this not really a URL, but that's okay. A URI, which is URI, is kind of a superset of URLs. URLs fall under URIs. I know I'm being a little specific there, but that's okay. But here just has this URL, and this is your Mongo. Okay, and you need to make sure that you have your password here. And this is the same one that you'll have if you go to Compass, or you can go to your Atlas as well. But in Compass, you can view that and you can copy that. But if you've got your cluster connected, you have to like here, edit collection. I'm gonna edit the connection. And here you need to actually disconnect. So you're going to have to disconnect from the database to edit this. And then if you click edit here, confirm, then you could grab this, okay? And as soon as you click in here, it's going to show you your password here. But so click in here, you grab this, okay? And that is what you use to put right here. Okay, and your database name. I'm doing a sample app that I'm kind of my own instructor app called the Quiz app. So mine's Quiz, but yours is probably going to be Issue Tracker or whatever you called your database when you created your different user documents and your bug documents. So I'm going to connect here to my cluster. And I have Quiz. Right, that's where I got this from. This is my quiz database, and I'm not sure what you called yours. Maybe you called it issue tracker. So here you would have issue tracker. You would use that and put that in your database name. Okay. So once you have that, let me change something real quick here. All right. And then so for in here, now if you've got that set up, and for your database here, if you got your env file set up correctly, and you did the npm install of MongoDB, in here you should be able to run this. And this is just for testing purposes. This is only, besides just us testing this, you're not going to be running it outside of this. So here, how you need to do this is because you're kind of running outside the application, right? We're not doing the npm start dev or anything like that. And you'll have to do it this way, and do no-r.env/config. and then the name of the file, database.js, or whatever you called yours. And then if you hit enter here, you should see your logging statements working, and also you should see the connected and ping. That happens from pinging the server. When you do a connect, it's going to print out connected, and then also it's going to print out ping, because it's going to try to besides just connecting to it, it's going to do what's called a ping command. A ping command is very popular way to do things in applications, is always have a ping command. So you're doing more than just connecting to it. You're kind of sending. It's kind of like sending a query, but you don't necessarily you might not have everything set up yet, so you can do what's called kind of a ping, where you ping it. Oh, yep. So it returns something, right? So that's what that's all about. Okay. And here we can just kill this. Get rid of all this. So please let me know if you having problems getting to this point. It doesn't work for you. Please let me know, because it's going to be hard for you to do anything if you cannot connect to the server. Okay, next thing. So do the env files, copy the database code, test the database connection, did all that. So how to implement Mongo in our code. I'm not necessarily going to go through every single thing we did yesterday, but just kind of walk through the process of what files you use and how we do things. Okay, so we're gonna first, you need to install and import MongoDB, and obviously you probably already did do the connection. You've already done that. We need to create functions in our database.js file and export them. And then we need to import those database functions into in this case, user.js or the Debug.js, any place that you're actually making a call to a function that you have defined in your database file. You're going to have to make sure you import those. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. So let's look at, so this was just the base file, obviously, the database file, but now I'm adding more functions. Add more functions. So I have a getAllUsers here. Okay. And as you notice, there's an async for asynchronous, and there's this await. So this will actually, and the reason to use the await is so that it'll actually wait until it makes the connection before it returns and goes to the next statement, right? In basic JavaScript, if you don't, especially when you're calling something external to your app, you kind of need to wait for that, right? When you're just doing something internally in a function that you've got all the data right there, it's not necessary. But in this case, it's necessary. Okay. So here's our getAllUsers function. That's basically using the users collection and doing a find on that. So you'll need to write it like this. And like I mentioned yesterday, make sure that this is the collection that you have in your cluster, in your database. So I'm using this quiz one. I have my users, plural with an S. So that's the one I'm using with an S there. Okay. So here's a function I created, getAllUsers. And then in my user.js file, what you'll have to do is you'll have to go ahead and import this. And when you're importing it, depends on how your directory structure is set up. So this user.js file is under routes API. So you'll have to go up one directory, two directories to get to your database file, which is at the root, basically, at your root. Mine says quiz, yours should say final project. And at the final project root directory, you have a database.js file, and also these other ones as well. And yeah, I didn't mention also your env file also needs to be at the root. So these are all your files that need to be at the root. And then, So to access that database.js file, you need to make sure that you go up 2 directories to access that. I will talk about here in a little bit combining this. We can combine this instead of just doing this, just by adding commas after each one, and you can make one long string. So that's one way to handle that. Okay, so you import this, and now that you imported this module. Oh, one thing I did forget to mention here, back in the database.js file, whenever you create a function that you want to use in another file, you need to make sure that you export it. So here I'm exporting getAllUsers, okay? And other ones here as well. But when you're starting out, you really, and actually, if we're not using this, we don't always use all these other ones, so you might not need these, okay? All right, so yep, make sure you export that so that you can import it in here. And then obviously you can go ahead and then use it. Okay, let me see what else I have here. Okay. Okay, I did want to mention because this happens. I know students have problems with this. I've had problems with this, and I just and sometimes it can become a little little bit more of a pain than just killing the server. So once you've already have your server running, right? You can't do it again. Okay, so let me show you that. Sometimes when we used we use like the built-in server that we use, it'll just actually create another, like you do right here, run, and then do the you got to do that on an HTML file, right? I even forgot the name of that server. What do we call that thing? Let's see what we call that server. Live server, that's right. It just popped in my head. Live server. So when you do live server, when we've used live server before, you can actually just, right click live server. You can have multiple of those run. It's not a big deal. So just a little bit of a bigger deal here with this, because like once you create one, once you have things running. So I'm going to do npm run start dev. And obviously if for some reason any of the students are behind in their assignment, so to speak, when you create it, back we did, what was it, 2-1, when we created this in the first place, the very first creation of this for issue tracker. You need to make sure that you have your script set up, you have type equal module, that's important, and also have these here as well, especially the start dev here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. And now I'm up and running, So if for some reason you end up, doing something, it'll happen at times, and you end up leaving, coming back, and you don't notice that you got a server running. And if you try to do this again, you're going to receive this error. Okay. Now, it can happen for other reasons too sometimes, okay? So first, though, this makes it very obvious. You got 2 terminals running, and now you're trying to, start another server here. So you're going to get this error, okay? Now, it's obviously easy. You can just go ahead and delete the server here and that, okay? You can delete the first one or whatever, right? Or use the first one and close this. That's fine. But sometimes they get hung up. Some strange things happen. I've even had situations where students actually close Visual Studio Code. They don't have anything open, but for some reason it's still holding on to those processes. So what you can do on that is, I'm going to go to Task Manager here. And what you'll have to do sometimes, Generally, it's not a problem, but if you know it just doesn't seem to work for you, under here Visual Studio Code depends on your version. I'm using a Windows 11, but you'll have these different node, and sometimes you might actually close it, but it's still holding on to something. So you have to kind of come in here and go right click and end task of these different nodes. See, I mean, it's running multiple ones here, right? Even though you've got two terminals, it's running multiple right now for different things it's doing, because you know, to create different threads, right? So sometimes things get a little hosed up, even though you could have no terminals running, and all of a sudden the first time you come in here with a new terminal and then you try to run it and you're getting like it's already in use, and you're looking around, you don't see it. Sometimes it's still there even though you don't see it. Okay, so sometimes you'll have to come in here and kind of end the task on those. Okay. All right. Let's see what's next here. Configurations using key value pairs in Postman. So I want to go through that a little bit. So in Postman here, I'm going to be looking at register. So here, if you're going to be using key value pairs like this, and I suggest you do body, you need to make sure that this is selected, URL form URL encoded. Okay. The other way is doing raw and JSON, and you could do raw and it's going to be text by default, and then you choose JSON. Then you have to actually do the curly brace and put the all of those parameters in here, right? Or you can do the form URL encoded and do it this way. I suggest you go ahead and do it this way for the most part. But when you do it like this and you use the form URL encoded here in your code, you'll have to make sure that you have in any object, in any module. So for user.js, no, let me see. No, I'm saying that wrong. I apologize. In your index.js file, you only have to do it one place. I apologize. No, yeah. So here, you need to make sure you have like this, okay? And whatever you call this, you know, you could have called this. This we're just using app for Express here, okay? And here for Express, we're using, we're calling it, you know, here we're using a router, right? A router. In our index here, we're using app just for the Express. We're not using a router here, okay? And here, then we're doing all these sets. This is where we're setting our static and that. But you need to make sure that you have this line like this. This can be false. It can be extended false or true. That's fine. Extended just gives you a little more options there. So I just go ahead and make it true. But you have to have this to be able to send those parameters like that from Postman. Okay. Okay, now we just kind of wanted to look at refactoring our code a little bit. So, you know, and this always is a best practice thing. This is a kind of a continuous thing you're going to be doing wherever you work. You know, there's times where, you know, or even just starting something out, you know, how you have your code now is going to be different. It's going to be different, you know, when you get to the final project at the end. So, you know, there's going to be times you're going to change your code. Things ain't going to work right. You're going to change it to be a little more efficient, whatever. All right. More readable, you know, kind of follow best practices a little more. So here we can go ahead and like combine these. Okay, we can combine these. So you obviously in starting, you're probably going to be doing one at a time, right? You can't import something that doesn't exist. You're going to get errors, right? So you're probably just going to do one at a time, right? And then comma, and then add the next one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then eventually you'll have something that's going to be kind of like this, right? And obviously you can kind of notice it will be lighter in color if you're not actually using it, right? If you're not using it. So you can actually import something you're not using. That kind of makes sense, right? But you cannot import something that's not defined. If this isn't defined, you're going to have a problem, okay? So here's just a way to kind of make that a little more concise, okay? Or thing, refactor getUsers, call from route. Okay, yeah, I wanted to go over this. So yesterday I kind of wrote this. So you kind of look at that. We've got this then, and you're doing the then and catch when you're calling this. You got this chained using these chained functions here. But this other one's kind of didn't do it that way, right? So really what you can do is you don't have to do it this way. You have to do it this way if you're not using async and await, okay? This is kind of more of the older way to do it, okay? This is the more modern way to do this. And to explain kind of how this works here, for the async and await. So let's look at this one down here. So the async keyword, which is right here, is used to declare an asynchronous function. When you define an asynchronous function as async, what it always does is always returns a promise, regardless of what the async function explicitly returns. It will always wrap that return in a promise. Okay. Now, if you call the async function, if you call this async function, but do not use this, now you can get away with, if you can see here, it's trying to put that in there, but you don't have to have that there. Sometimes this thing's a little feisty. Sometimes you don't have to have it there, even though it keeps on wanting to. That's one of the bad things about the Copilot. So here, what was kind of going on there is, I can show you how to kind of get rid of that. So like if you see these suggestions, you can always hit the escape key and it'll get rid of that, okay? So, escape. So here I got rid of the await. That's okay to do that, all right? That's okay to do that. But if you have await here, you have to have async here. If you get rid of async, it's going to be an error here. So if you have an error here, you know you're missing in your function declaration your async. Right? So let's go ahead and do that. And so let me show you what can happen here. I'm going to go ahead and grab one of these just so we can kind of take a look at this real quick, and then we're going to go back up and refactor the previous one. But let me go grab an ID from Compass here of one of my users. So I'm going to grab the ID here. And so we're just going to make sure it works. And I'm going to use the user by ID. And just to review, since I'm here, you need to make sure that your port's the correct one, and make sure that you have this API users. Depends how you have this defined in your index.js file, right? So just go back to that just for 1 second since we're here. I just want to make sure. Your index.js file here, you have it like your user routers using this, right? So whatever this is what that's going to need to be, okay? And then obviously in this case, we're just passing in a user ID other ones, if you've got other, for the register and that, you have to have the /register, right? But in this case, we're just doing API users and we're passing in the ID. Let's hit send just to make sure that this works. Yes, and it returns our data here. Okay, returns our data there. So that's good. And I just want to make a change so I can show you this. So if I get rid of await, just why it's important here. If I get rid of await, so what this is going to, it's not going to wait. And I hope this works like I want it to. I think it will. So now if I hit send, boom, it comes back empty. So something to, something to look at. You're receiving something empty. There can be different reasons for that, but basically because what happened here is when you have an await, it's going to wait, as opposed to what it did is it actually, it didn't wait, and it set this empty. It didn't wait for this to return. It set this to empty because it wasn't there pretty much right away. Because the database call, there's going to be a little latency, right? So it didn't wait for that, and it just sped through the thing, and boom, it returned it. So it returned empty string. Okay, it returned empty string. All right. So, yep, so we need to put that back. All right. So here, you're going to want to go ahead and refactor this. So we can do here is we can do a const users equals that and that. Okay, and we can, what we'll need to do here, so let's see what this does. Do we like this? Yes. So we do want to do these try catches. It kind of mentions this in the lab. Now, one thing it doesn't mention in the lab is the 500 errors, but usually when you do a catch, most of the time you want to handle, when you're doing a try, you want to be handling most of your other things, okay? That, if it's not found and things like that, you want to handle those kinds of things, okay? But if there's just some other error, sometimes you can access the database, there's a problem with the network and you can't access the database. There's multiple different things that can happen trying to access data from a database. Then the database, it could be a good call, everything could be right. There could be just some kind of a glitch, your password expired, all kinds of different things that all of a sudden you can't get data from the database. And that's where those kind of things are going to get caught in your catch statement here, right? And usually you have these as a 500 error. I know the lab don't ask for that, but just pointing that out. So obviously you got no wait here. It's complaining. We know why it's complaining here is because you need to have the async here. And now I'm going to save this. And okay, let me test this real quick. I was kind of looking at the code there a little bit too. And now we're good. All right. So we kind of refactored that, got rid of the then catch. This is more a traditional way using the async await. Okay. It's probably a good idea to do a if statement here. If users, I'm not going to do that. So I just want to do that. That's good. We're just going to, if users, we're going to return the users. And then else. So this, the 500 error, the catch ain't going to, you can return an empty thing. If it's not there, it's not going to do it. But else is going to help in this. Okay. And we do want to use JSON on this. So when we do JSON here, you have to make sure that you have the curly braces. Okay. So if users, return our users, else we're gonna, and I know the lab tells you to return JSON on everything, so return JSON. Now another thing I want to mention since we're here, well, a couple different things. Now as far as like return statements, you don't have to have a return statement here. Basically what this is going to set the status. When this method ends, it's going to return back to the calling, which is back to Postman here. But it may make sense to add return statements, because the reason for that is, now here it probably doesn't matter as much, because when you catch an error, you're pretty much done then. Once you get your error, you're pretty much done, and it's going to return whatever. But if you had other logic here, let's just say you just did this, okay? I just want to point this out. You did if this, and then after this, you had some other logic here. You had some other logic here, whatever, and you did some things. Well, it's going to set this. It's going to still execute what's down here. It's just setting this, okay? It's not necessarily returning that. It's just setting the status. So it could possibly execute this code here, okay? So sometimes you're best to also include those returns on there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Obviously, if you got everything in the blocks correctly, it's not an issue, but just pointing that out. All right. Here, what's kind of a good one, and it all depends on what you're doing. In this case here, you've got this error. You have a potential of an error here, obviously. So this is a good statement to use right there, okay? Error fetching the users, and this will just put a debug statement in your console, right? Now this one here, though, could be something that actually ends up, and it depends on how your application's configured. And most of the stuff we're going to be doing, this is either going to be returned to like Postman, but you as a developer using Postman, an extra, another user wouldn't. But when we start really building the UI out, and that front end part, when we start building that out, there may be an error there, and it may be getting returned from here. It's going to be I shouldn't say may. It's going to be getting returned from here. So sometimes, like, you want to make something that's kind of user friendly, because the users don't know. Well, I got an internal. Usually, you just gonna say something. You can say something like an unexpected error occurred, like that, and then please contact whoever, right? There you go. So that's a good one there, right? So this will get returned to Postman as well. This will get returned to Postman, or if you're, you got a front end, and when we eventually will get there, we'll have a React front end. We'll be returning that as well, right? This is good just for you as a developer. This is going to be logged to your file, right? And in a production setting, in a real world, you'll have some kind of a logging file that you can access, that you can access where this is running on some other server. We're doing everything locally, but you could be running on another server, and so there'll be a console there'll be a console on that server where it's running. Okay, there'll be a console on the server where it's running, and these statements will be, depending on how you have things configured, will be printed out. So then you can, some person, some user went ahead and reported an error, then you can actually go and look at it. And that's where sometimes it makes more sense, besides just an error message, to add additional information as well. Like, you could also add like the user ID here. For our purposes, we don't have to necessarily do all that, but I'm just letting you know. Things like this, error fetching users. Well, here, this is not a specific ID. This is get all, right? So that one probably it wouldn't be relevant. But something like here, where somebody's requesting a certain user ID, and you have the same scenario where you have some kind of a error that's out of your control, maybe like I mentioned earlier, you have a database has a problem accessing the database, whatever, or something else. You also return other different information as well, maybe the original user ID or whatever, right? So, okay, I think I went into that enough. I hope some of that helps you. All right, combining statements, refactoring getUser, we did that. We talked about async and await, using try-catch statements as well, return statements and also, so went through all of that. Using the newId in the database. Now, before I talk about that, just kind of want to mention, since I'm thinking about it. So, some of the things that maybe I did yesterday, you need to make sure that you read the lab and do what it says to do. So you, like, if it says you need to have a try catch, you should have try catch in all of your routes. Okay, even if I didn't do that, I might have missed a couple try catches. You need to make sure, and you need to make sure that you do what it says in there. You have to. If it asks for a certain status, you need to have a certain status, okay? I don't think it asks for 500s in there at all. I already looked. I know it didn't. But you need to make sure that you have the correct statuses and the try catches. And so follow what it says in the lab. Okay, so I wanted to talk about that newId. Just a way, because I already had some stuff in here, so I just kind of wanted to this is kind of about refactoring things. You're always going to be refactoring things, okay? So we have this, and actually originally, if, probably the students who didn't grab some stuff right away, I actually made a change to the lab where you have the database stuff that you copy in, because it was doing something different that was deprecated. So I went ahead and updated this. So any place we've got this create from hex string below, we can just use newId instead. So I think I did it for this one. So basically, this one here, anywhere we're just going to get the ID. So here's one. Let me see. I got this. Okay. So here, you can just replace this. I'm just going to show you just a little idea of refactoring things, right? And then here, GitHub Copilot suggesting to change that. Once you do it, it's kind of learning, right? So this is good, because what this is going to do is it's using Mongo's object ID, which is different than what's a JavaScript one. As you can see, when I hover over this, it talks about, it's not a JSON object ID. It's called a BSON, right? BSON, which stands for binary. Binary script object notation, okay? And it's just a little bit different. So just something to keep in mind. And in this case, we're using that, okay? I thought there was more of them in there than that. Let's see, one other thing I guess I wanted to go over here. So we did do the register user. Let me go through that real quick here in the user object. So we have this register user. We can make this a lot smaller here. And obviously this is kind of from that very first assignment that we're checking to make sure all the fields are there. And here, though, what we're doing is for a new user, we add this new object. Created on, we added the new date like this. Okay, different ways you can do this. You can do it down here after the fact, after you create this new user object. All of these things, okay, all of these things are coming right from here. Okay. So these will be populated from what's up there. These are populated, basically, you're defining what these are right here by using the colon, right? So if you're going to have something in here that doesn't already exist, these already existed. Okay, these already existed. You'll have to do this like this with the colon. Okay, and so this will create a new object ID for this. And a new date. Now here, what we're doing here is we're using, and we did this yesterday, but just kind of a quick review. Here we're actually hashing our password. We're taking our we're taking the new password, new user password, which is what was passed in, and so we're setting that to. Well, we're basically encrypting this, and I talked about this yesterday, so I won't talk about it. But this is how many iterations through a salt thing that happens. So that's just how it hashes it, and so it will hash your password and save that. Okay, save that to there, and so then when you register a new user, and so let's just do that real quick. And I wanted to show you something also. I'll implement logging 3. So this is going to be, it's basically the register one's going to do what? It's going to check. What it does is basically it checks all the fields. Are they there? Yes, they are. Then it does does a search user, goes and calls the get user by ID. Says, does it already exist? If it already exists, then it's going to go ahead and return email already exists, is already registered. You don't do anything else. You're going to go ahead and create this new object. Then you're going to go ahead and encrypt your password. Okay. Then you're going to encrypt your password. So I'm going to go ahead and hit send here, and it has new user registered, and this is Mr. Permissions 3. Obviously you want to make better users than that, but I just do a lot of different things, so I do that sometimes. And then I'm going to go to my database here. Then obviously you can come over here in Compass, and here's my data. Hit refresh, and you can see now it says 1 of 8 instead of it had 1 of 7. So the last one here is this. Okay, I'm going to hold on to this. I'm going to copy this. So this was the last one I just created, right? Yep, permissions 3. And as you can see, your password's hashed now. The password that we sent in was 123456, and now it's hashed. Okay. Now if I went ahead and wrote this login as well. And so what this login does is it's going to take an email and a password. So you're going to send an email and a password. And it checks to see if you entered them. And not, please enter your credentials. And then it's going to try to get the user by email. Okay. If it can't find it, it's going to give you a message, user not found, which is 404. 404 is always not found, just to review. 401's used a lot of times for, invalid credentials, data not being set, things like that, right? 401. 200 is for success. And then also we had like 500. It doesn't ask you to do that, but 500 is usually some other kind of critical error that's usually beyond your control, right? And earlier I said that, kind of want to change this and not have internal server error, have something a little more user-friendly, right? Which, I'll update that more here in the future myself. I'll refactor that. But here now what we're doing, so we're doing this login. We're trying to get the user via email. If it finds it, we're coming down to here. And then what we're doing is we're doing the bcrypt compare, and we're comparing the password that was sent in. And the one that's going to be sent in is going to be the 123456, right? The one that is going to be in the database is going to be this one here. All right, this is the one in the database that came back in our call, right? That came back here on line 105 from our call. That's going to be this one. And this is it's basically going to do almost like the reverse. It's going to have the encrypted one, and it's going to have your original one, and it's going to compare those, okay? If it's false, it's going to say they're invalid. You passed in the wrong password, okay? Now, I also want to mention, though, is once you start implementing this, your old stuff's not going to work. If you have, and let me just show you that real quick. So your older ones, where you've just got whatever password, so these were a couple of encrypted ones. This isn't really encrypted. That just has hash password, right? But this is not really a hash password. This is what a hash password looks like, right? This was just for an example purposes. So this is just a regular password. That's not going to work. Okay, these old ones are not going to work now. I'll prove that to you as well. So just keep that in mind. Once you start encrypting them, once you start putting the code in here, you're going to have to make sure that your password's all hashed. Okay. So sometimes you'll have to redo some things. You'll have to sometimes redo some of your users and stuff, things like that. It's not static where we're going to define all these users and nothing's going to change, right? Things are going to change throughout the rest of the course. All right, so we got this one here. So I'm going to go ahead. I went ahead and saved my ID of that latest one, which was right here. And now if I do a register, user register, not register, I'm sorry, login. Apologize there. So here I'm going to log into 3. Let me just send in a bad one. I'm going to hit send, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so basically it's going to be doing that compare that we've seen, comparing what's in the database, the encrypted one in the database, with the password we sent it. So I'm going to hit send here, and it's to say invalid login credentials provided. Please try again. I'm going to go ahead and put this back to a 6, which is obviously not a good password, but that's what I have here. And I'm going to hit send here, and it's going to say welcome back. Okay. Now, if I go ahead and just to show you this, guys, just want to, just important to keep in mind, so you're wondering what's going on with your other ones. So here's this one here, and this one says what hashed password for. So let me grab that. Oh, no, I don't need the ID here. I never did need the ID the other time, did I? I'm just going to grab the email address here. And this is that Susan Davis, and I'm going to grab, make sure I get the password right also. So here's her password. So this is the password that's in the database for her. This is her username. This is her password. But since we're doing that bcrypt now, it's not going to work. Invalid. No matter what you change this to, it's not going to work because it's not encrypted, right? So later on, though, we'll have a thing where we can update yourself, update me. We can do update me, and you can update your username and password. Okay. So that'll take care of that problem. All right. So that's all I guess I really have. I hope some of these things I went over kind of help you, especially you know, I'm sure most of the students haven't started with anything yet. You know, because they're probably working on their hands-on test first. So, but you know, please let me know if you have any questions, and have a good day.